Welcome back to Brand on the Rocks, where bold ideas meet clear messaging. I'm your host, Ryan Holck, and this is going to be a straight up episode. No fluff, no garnish, just a short, sip sized pour of marketing clarity that you can put to work immediately. In this episode, I'm talking about the 3 stories that every brand must master. I'll share some mistakes that I see business owners, myself included, make, and we'll talk a little bit about how to fix it. So let's get into it. I'm going to assume that you know who Mr. Beast is. A little bit of the story and the following that is Mr. Beast and YouTube and millions of subscribers, billions of views. And one of the interesting things about Mr. Beast is he understands the power of story. And the power of story, like, in my opinion, very few people do. And that is that story oftentimes is about managing attention and getting people not just to tune in emotionally, but to tune in visually, to tune in and listen with intentionality. And one of the things that I've seen him do, and it's been a couple years now, but in all of his crazy wackiness and shows now on TV and growing team and things, one of the things that he has started to do is to have some philanthropy side. And truth be told, I'm always a sucker for that kind of thing. I spent a lot of years in the nonprofit space. And so when I see someone who's trying to meet an actual need, not a made up need, but meet a need and do something worthwhile, I kind of am drawn to it and attracted to it. But a couple years back, he saw a problem that he thought that he could solve. And that was that there was a village or a group of villages and schools specifically in Africa where the kids struggled to make it to school every day because they needed shoes. They didn't have shoes. Walking barefoot over the type of terrain for oftentimes miles to get to the local school was problematic. And his solution, along with his team, was not, we're going to send them shoes, but let's go to Africa, find a local group who builds and makes shoes, we can actually have them make shoes for these students, and then we'll pass them out. And as simple an idea as that sounds, when it came down to it, it actually became problematic. There were haters on one side who thought the idea was absolutely ridiculous. Why would you be showing up to a country that's not yours to try and solve a problem? And there was people who thought it was absolutely amazing. The reception from the school, from the teachers in the school, from the kids was amazing. But there was this tension, and it really brought them back to, there's some YouTube videos about it and you can Google it and I'll maybe put it in the show notes. But the interesting thing was that it brought them back to what story are we trying to tell? Because they easily could have been distracted, easily could have gotten off course of the actual thing they wanted to do was we want to show up and provide a way for shoes to get into the hands of needy kids, but we want to meet that need through the local economy. And so as they wrestled through this, they found that they really had an opportunity to clarify the goals of what they were trying to do, to share their story better. It actually came up that in a lot of ways, I think from a marketing, from a messaging standpoint, they won. It isn't that they won everyone over, but they turned a potentially negative train wreck of public opinion back towards the larger vision. And in the process, the haters kind of fell to the wayside because they looked foolish. Let's just be honest. The reality is we're not Mr. Beast, and we're never going to probably have a following the size of what he does. But like it or not, stories in your business or brand are no longer optional. And there's some lessons that I see in this idea of what Mr. Beast did there, but he has also now repeated in other places. And you don't have to be a YouTuber for these rules. Really, they are a lens for you to see the world and share about your business. And as I said in episode number 1, clarity in our messaging is of utmost importance, because in the absence of a clear story, someone else has the opportunity to write the narrative for you. And that narrative is not always going to be what you want it to be. Mr. Beast had a narrative of here's what we want to do. Others tried to steal it. He had to take it back. And there's 3 lessons that I think we can take away from this. And I really want to lean into and talk about today that I see businesses struggling with. I see myself struggling with. And a lot of times when I'm called in for consulting to sit with a business, at the end of the day, when we've kind of whiteboarded out where are we going, the core issues come down to one of these stories, and learning to navigate through them, learning to share them efficiently. So I'd like to, with that as a background, kind of give you 3 ideas about stories that your brand needs to be able to share effectively. So the very first one is the audience story. And really, this is stories that you are going to tell to your audience. Essentially, this is how you're sharing with your own leadership, how you're sharing with your board, how you're sharing with your team, what you're sharing out in public. It's your social channels, it's your website. It's, at the end of the day, the message that you want to reverberate out into the world. And we spend, as business leaders, especially as marketers, most of our time on these specific stories. We obsess over the words we're going to use, over the ideas of what are we going to share, how are we going to talk about this product, how are we going to talk about this service, and thinking about how we're going to connect people to our business or brand. And the reality is that in all of that seeking and market stuff that we try and do to talk about our business well, if we can come down to a single repeatable story, everything changes. And that's because stories give you a way to help others. They help others to retain information, to grasp complex details. And that's right there is one of the biggest things that I see brands and businesses struggling with is we can get so in our head about everything we want to share about. And for us to be able to focus all the complex things down and share it in a clear, compelling way takes a lot of work, takes effort, and takes really some storytelling tools. If we can share our story clearly, it can help us really to share and teach others important concepts about our products and services. One of the things that I find is that we intuitively, as the business owner, know the problem we're trying to solve. My customer has this problem and I'm trying to solve it. And the difficulty is that sometimes our customer doesn't recognize that's the core problem they have. They see the results of it, but they don't necessarily know what the core centering point is. And so when we can begin to wrangle the story and figure out what is it we need to share to get people on board, it connects people to us and it allows them then to reminisce about shared experiences. And if you took a moment and took the link for the Mr. Beast story, you'll notice that there's a point with the team where they've got to figure out what is the public version of this that we're going to share. And it's not that they want to protect it or hide it. It's that they want it to be so clear that everyone who hears it understands. And that takes wrestling through what are all the pieces that we want to share and what are the most important ones in that. Think of it this way. If you're making coffee every morning, like I do, a pot of coffee, and I have different kinds of filters that I can put in. I've got a metal one that's kind of a gold color. I've got different kinds of paper ones. I've got solid like puck ones that will go into my espresso machine. And at the end of the day, all of those hold coffee, and all of those will allow the water to filter through and hopefully leave the ground coffee in its place. But each of those is just a little bit different kind of filter, a little bit different kind of way for the water to go through that's faster, that's slower, and the end result is a little different. So you can have a cup of coffee that's super rich, or you can have a cup of coffee that's more weak and, begging to have pumpkin spice latte or something added to it. But the difference is not that it's coffee. The difference is the process of filtering. And sometimes we just have to think about our stories as if we're going to filter them. I'm putting something between my audience and me that helps me think, how do I share it in this context? And you'll see in the Mr. Beast stuff that the team did that. They had to think through, how can I share it? What needs to be repeated? If people take away nothing else about the story, what are the most important things that we want them to take away? And the challenge of this for a lot of businesses is we just think that's going to come out intuitively. We just think we're going to get in front of the right person and it's just going to be there. And that's not the reality of how it works. Now, I've seen amazing salespeople who can pull a almost a rabbit out of a hat, so to speak, in terms of telling a story. But for the majority of people, it's difficult. And it can be difficult with people it can be difficult with people you don't know, because most of us share normal life stories on a whim without planning. But you can't get away with that in your business. You're going to need to take all the amazing things you do and figure out, how am I going to filter these? How am I going to distill this down so that the product that I serve to someone at the end of the day is so clear they know exactly what we want them to do. So that is really the first story that you've got to be thinking about, is the audience story, the story that you are speaking specifically to the people you're trying to reach, who you have a product or service for. How can you get that so clear? What can you put in place to help you filter the complex things you do down into the most important pieces? The next story is the story really about your results. And it's the story that others are going to tell about you. And in a lot of businesses, I see us really shortchanging ourselves in this. These are the stories that circulate around our business or our brand. And in a digital age, the default is that means Yelp. That means Google. That means someone giving an online review. And yeah, that's part of it. That is part of the story, that you want people to have such an amazing experience with your brand that they will go and publish something. Look, go to Amazon. There are reviews everywhere. It's legitimately the way that Amazon drives traffic to products, is through reviews, because they work. But I don't know if you've ever sat and read like a page at Yelp or Google reviews and read what people actually write. And the majority of the time, it's pretty lame. It's like, they had a great product. It was so nice to work with them. And while it says positive things, what it doesn't say is what the actual experience was like. How did it make the life better for the person being served by this product or service? What win did they get when they had their problem, they used our product, life got better? What was the benefit of it? That's what so often is missing in some of those external, like review-based things. And we have an opportunity in our social channels to begin to break that down, to begin to have a multi-level or back and forth conversation with people where, we put something out there, people respond. It's actually a conversational kind of thing. It's actually social. And part of social, I have a love-hate relationship with social. I've managed social for other people, managed it for my own businesses and brands. And there are days that I never want to think about social again. And there are days that I can put head down and spend 8-10 hours in it. And what it comes to for me is the story I'm trying to share in this moment compelling enough that someone would actually want to listen? And is it so compelling that they would listen long enough to want to respond and actually have a conversation with us? And for me, that's one of those filters, those distilling moments about, yes, we're going to talk about the results. We're going to talk about how we make our life better. But sometimes we do that by just sharing the story about the people we serve best and sharing it in really open, honest ways. And the other piece of sharing your results, stories that other people are going to tell about you, is personal conversations. And I am recognizing that we are reaching a point where referrals of brands is happening less and less. But there is something amazing that happens if we can equip the people we have served well with a story that they can share with others. And if you listen to episode number 1 talking about clarity, there was actually a download in that episode and a process you could walk through. And one of the action steps, kind of takeaways from that process, was how can you begin to generate some of those stories for personal conversations, for referrals that others can think, oh, I know who could solve that for you, and actually have the words to share the story you want shared. The interesting thing is, thinking about Mr. Beast, is as they went to solve this need for shoes and people began to talk, the things that people talked about were not the things they wanted repeated, because it was actually a divisive thing, not even connected to the story. A lot of it was made up. And they found that they had to really re-engage the story, had to direct and guide it so that the people connected to it had the right words to share about it. They didn't go to their friend and say, did you see the crazy thing that Mr. Beast was doing? And instead they said, did you see how Mr. Beast and his team responded to this? It actually allowed them to serve these schools better. What a cool thing. If we can find ways as a brand manager, as an owner, as a communications person, as a consultant, to share stories in ways that we're actually equipping people, because we're directing our words to them in a way that allows them to repeat it, to turn around and share our story for us. The question really is, when they share and when they have a moment to step onto whatever platform that is, whether it's, a friend face to face, it's over coffee, it's on social, are they going to advocate for you because they believe in you, or are they going to hate on your products and services and distract you and really suck your time? So that's story number 2 you've got to be thinking about, is the results, and how are we going to tell the story about our business. And this is the one that really gets me every time. It's the one that I personally have wrestled with the most, and that is your private world. Essentially, the stories that you tell yourself. I got to be honest that in business, there are moments where I've been uncertain of what to do next. And in the best days, uh, my internal dialogue, that personal story I share with myself of what I'm trying to accomplish, what the goals are, it pushes me forward with vision, with new ideas. It's encouraging. It makes it easy to do long days. But on the tough days, that same voice can scream at you about failure, about inadequacies, about how much better you could do than you are currently at these moments. And those stories I'm finding in my own life, I'm seeing in the lives of a lot of friends who have gone out to become entrepreneurs themselves, is that they have the story to derail your best efforts. They have the opportunity to derail you. And those stories have the opportunity and the power to derail your very best efforts. And so what I'm finding is that this internal story, it's one thing to know I'm going to talk about my products. It's another thing, how am I going to figure out how to talk to my audience? It's quite another to figure out, how am I going to talk to myself? And what I'm finding is that it has to be framed in reality, meaning you have got to find someone in your life who will be a sounding board for you and help guide your inner conversation and that internal voice so that it's set in reality and not crazy brain. There's lots of brain science about the way that the words you use, the words you say to yourself dramatically impact your outcomes. And so we've got to make sure that truth and reality are at the center of the story that we're telling ourselves and really squash the destructive internal stories. For quite a while now, I've been working on a book, and probably almost as long as I thought I needed a podcast, I've been working on a book, and it's fairly close. But I found in the process of writing that it's not that I hate writing, it's that I deferred the parts I thought were going to be the most challenging as long as physically possible. And I did it because self-doubt was present. I had frustration, and it became the leading voice. And there were days, I spent a lot of days sitting at Panera writing with as many 32-ounce sodas as I could physically keep down. But it took me in those days, not just the intentionality of sitting and writing, but it took me processing with someone who had been through those steps before, who knew what it was like to fight through writing a book, knew what it was like to have self-doubt, to process through and say, what is the reality of this? Is this you just in your head, or is there something else here? And I had a business coach who helped me with some of that. You will hear from him at some period of time on this podcast. He will be part of one of the shared port episodes. But it helped me to set straight the crazy brain that was going on. And even to rework some of the content and the outlines to see why the ideas I was wrestling with needed to be shared and were worth fighting for. And I found that it was so easy to lose sight of the end from the middle. And the stories that you tell yourself can be dangerous to your business. So you have got to find someone you trust, someone who believes in you, who's going to help you process and get your brain right so that the story you are telling gets centered. Otherwise, the stories in your head are going to be like a hole in a rowboat. And all it's going to do, it may not sink the ship, but it's going to draw so much attention and effort away from what you are moving forward in that you're going to miss out on many of the important things. So those are the three stories that you have got to figure out how to work through in your business. The story that you are telling your audience, the story of your results that your audience is sharing with others, and your own private world story of how you're talking to yourself. To begin to wrestle through, to figure out those answers will make a huge difference. So my question for you today is, what story are you struggling to tell in your business right now? Of those three, which is the most dominating in your mind? And what impact is that struggle having on your business? Is it financial? Is it encouragement? Is it drive? Is it what impact is it actually having? And what would having a solution to that struggle mean for your business? Now, here's the reality is I want this podcast to be super practical. And you're going to find that I'm going to talk about some things that, oh, this seems really marketing. And there's other times you're going to go, this feels really story. Like I don't see always how they connect. And the reality is that our marketing and our storytelling overlap. And there's moments where you won't see how they are separate. And there are other moments where you go, oh, well, that was a nice story. That was an act of marketing. And I want you to begin to look at, if you aren't already, master storytellers like Mr. Beast, like others who are like Taylor Swift with her music, who are doing amazing jobs of deciding on a single idea I want to share in this moment, and then crafting a story that can be shared with their audience, a story that can be shared by their audience about the results and the efforts, and then a centering story about what is the story you're telling yourself about the reality of what you're trying to accomplish in those moments. If you can begin to wrestle through those in your business, things will change dramatically. Now, this has been a this has been a straight up episode of Brand on the Rocks. And if you have stayed on till this long, there's just a couple things I'd love to share with you. And that is that if you would love, this has been a straight up episode of Brand on the Rocks, where bold ideas meet clear messaging. If you are wrestling with one of these three stories in your business and you would like some help to begin to process, to begin to figure out, where am I stuck? How come I'm struggling to tell the story of my business clearly? I'd love to help you. The information to reach out will be in the show notes. I also referenced that there was a resource from the last show. I'll put a link to it in this as well if you want to go back, figure out how you can work on some of those referral stories that others are sharing for you. Either way, I would love to be able to speak into your business, to be able to direct and give you guidance. Reach out to me. Love to hear from you. As always, shout out to those who have liked and a shout out to those who have liked and shared the podcast on your favorite channels. Would love to see this podcast grow. Thank you so much. Until next time, keep your stories clear and your ideas bold.